And it is now my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for today, Ms. Amanda McKenzie.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Looking out at this audience, it struck me that I had a similar sort of reaction to Kate Middleton when she walked out on the balcony last night, right before the kiss. She went, "Oh wow," feels a little bit like that looking at such an impressive audience. I wanted to firstly tell you a little bit about myself and my journey, and then tell you some of the lessons that I feel like I've learnt in the last few years, which doesn't feel like that long since I was in your position. So at the beginning of 2006, I was at university studying law, and I picked up a book that a friend told me I had to read. It was Tim Flannery's The Weather Makers, and I read it while hiking through the wilderness in Tasmania. And it was a very harrowing experience for me because I felt like I was submerged in two opposite realities. On the one hand, I was reading this comprehensive account of climate change and the havoc it's expected to cause. But then on the other hand, I was in this amazing forest with these trees that were 75 metres tall. They've been there for 400 years, since before Europeans even knew Australia existed. And it struck me that we were looking at altering the climate in just one generation, while those trees have been there for just so long. So when I read about climate change and the threat that it posed to generations, our generation and all generations to come, it struck me most forcefully as a sense of injustice, that those who will have contributed the least to creating the problem will suffer the most from its impacts. Poor people, young people, animals, birds and plants, and all the other creatures that inhabit the earth with us. So if we don't adequately address climate change, we'll watch the earth change into a very different place in our lifetimes. We'll watch ice caps melt, sea levels rise, water and food become scarcer as mighty rivers dry up, and extreme weather become more frequent and forceful. So upon returning from Tasmania, I thought, oh gosh, I've got to do something, but what do I do? My sister and I started a small organisation educating people on climate change. And a few months later, we got a call from Sydney with some other young people that were doing a similar thing. And we decided that we could work together and that something was missing from the climate change debate. The idea was that young people, while generally ignored in the debate, could play a crucial role. So we brought together youth organisations from right around the country with lots of diverse mandates, from medical students, architecture students, science students, health professionals, faith-based organisations, all sorts. And while all of these groups have diverse mandates, they have something in common, which is they know that their constituents, young people, will be impacted by climate change. So we started the Australian Youth Climate Coalition. And we believe that what it will take is to have a powerful social movement to create impetus for change, both in terms of short-term political change, but also the longer-term cultural shift that needs to occur in the community to support that political change. And if you look throughout history, you'll find that change doesn't come from a powerful few. It comes through a united many. It comes through people and communities all over nations, all over the world, working together. So at the end of 2008, we built an organisation of 5,000 people, and we were pretty pleased with how we were going, but we thought we'd have to grow exponentially to have a real impact. So our goal was that by the end of 2009, we'd be the biggest youth organisation in Australia and hopefully the biggest youth initiative on climate in the world. We didn't know how to do this, but we had the goal. And the first step we decided was holding a national youth summit on climate change. We called it Power Shift. And what we did was bring together 1,500 young people to Sydney. We motivated and inspired them with speakers like Tim Flannery and Al Gore. We trained them to organise with tools vital to building a movement. We connected them with like-minded people all around the country. And then we created a collective experience to share our movement with the world. It might sound like a little bit of a strange experience, but what we did was create a mass flash dance on the steps of the Sydney Opera House. 1,000 young people in blue t-shirts and green hard hats dancing for the future. And we were celebrating. Rather than focusing on the catastrophe that we want to avoid, we want to focus on the future that we want to create together. And the world responded to our dance. The Australian national media covered it on all the TV channels and papers, and we had quickly over 100,000 views on YouTube, and emails started flowing in from around the world. people were inspired by a positive idea of how we can change the world. The next step, once we'd inspired these 1,500 people to work with us on climate change, we created a campaign called Youth Decide, a national youth vote on climate change. And what we asked the Power Shift participants to do was to organise an event in their community. It could be anything they liked, but they had to encourage young people to vote online for the type of world that they wanted to inherit. So in just 6 weeks, these 1,500 people organised 330 events all around the country, from Sydney to Dubbo to Mackay to Launceston to Perth and in Toowoomba as well. Together we mobilised 20,000 people to attend the events and 38,000 people to vote online, which was the biggest per capita youth mobilisation on climate in the world. So through Power Shift and Youth Decide, we did grow rapidly. We grew to 50,000 members in that year. And that membership was important both to change community attitudes, to have a lot of people out there talking about climate change and the urgency for action. But it also gave us a leverage point to talk to politicians of all stripes and to also take our message internationally to the UN conference both in Copenhagen and in Cancun at the end of last year. Our membership now stands at 60,000 and we're consistently out there in the media talking about sustainability and climate change and the need for action. But I wanted to focus mainly on what my experience has taught me. The first lesson was to do something that matters. At the start of 2008, when we were working on our big plan for the AYCC, I had a choice. I just graduated from arts law and I had a job at a prestigious law firm lined up. And I had to decide whether I'd stay with my organisation that I'd created, where I was getting paid nothing, or go and take this opportunity in law. And both were great options. And you can bet what my mum thought was a better idea. But what I decided at the time was, at the age of 23, that was the best time in my life that I could possibly take a risk. I had few responsibilities, and the total of all of my worldly assets were inside me. It was the knowledge that I'd learned at university, and it was the passion I had for sustainability and social change. So there will never be a better time to take a risk than when I had nothing to lose. And you may not know yet what your passion is, but again, there'll never be a better time to find out. The other thing that I realised pretty quickly was that my biggest barrier to my ambition was my imagination. It's the voice in your head that says, oh, I can't do that. I'm not smart enough. I'm not connected enough. I'm not wealthy enough. I don't have enough knowledge. It's that can't voice that keeps us from doing what we need to do and aiming as high as we possibly can. Some people think that success comes from fame, fortune and possessions. But it's not how much you have, it's how much you give. And success is living your life with integrity and purpose.